I'm feeling really ranty today. I'm just preparing you. Welcome. On this video, I'm going to be answering the question, how does an autistic dad, that's me, hence the, raise an autistic son? So somewhere up there. So keep watching as we discuss my son's diagnosis, parenting challenges, the benefits of diagnosis and being an autistic dad, and challenges of being an autistic dad.
And now, here's your neurologically different host, Orion Kelly.
Hey, I'm Orion Kelly and I'm autistic. Now, I was diagnosed as autistic as an adult, so much later in life. Since that diagnosis, which was life-changing, I've devoted my life to advocating for autistic people. I do podcasts, blogs, and these YouTube videos to increase understanding and acceptance of autistic people. So if that's something you'd be interested in, want to learn a little bit more, great. Subscribe to my channel and hit that notifications bell so you never miss another video. Plus you can find me on my socials. You can like the Orion Kelly page on Facebook, check me out on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and go to my website, orionkelly.com.au. Now I've said I'm an autistic dad, which means I must have an autistic child. Let's talk about my firstborn son and his journey to a diagnosis of being autistic. And from my point of view, I remember the birth of our firstborn son to be an extremely joyous time. But from the get-go, there were many challenges posed for us as parents. And really, when we look back at it, it was probably the most challenging times of our life. You can come across to people, not us, come across to people like we've just got a badly behaved son, we're bad parents, we don't know about discipline, they wouldn't get away with that if I was their parents, these kind of unhelpful comments. So you get from not strangers, but family and friends. He just needs a little bit of discipline. He wouldn't get away with that if I was his parents, like blah, blah, blah. But they don't know anything because they don't understand. Even before diagnosis, we had realized because how challenging it was raising our firstborn son in a standardized parenting model that we'd both been taught, we realized this wasn't going to work. So we'd already realized prior to diagnosis, we had to parent him in an entirely different way. There were things that weren't going to work. We could get the same result, but we couldn't do it in the same way. An example is we realized early on, if our son asked for something, we couldn't say no, even though we knew he couldn't get it straight away or get it. Now you might think, well, if you just say yes to your son all the time, he's going to be a brat. But this is the point, see, neurotypical expectations. What I mean by we didn't say no is we would say yes after blah. So I want to watch TV, turn on the TV. No TV. Big, crazy behavior, right? And you can't get him down. Now we know now that that could be a meltdown, behavioral outburst of an autistic child or an autistic dad. But prior to the diagnosis, it just becomes across like, whoa, this is not good. It can be really intense. And I think what's important to understand is we recognized that and adjusted that. I want to watch TV, turn the TV on. Yes, you can watch TV as soon as you've got dressed. Clearly that doesn't always change the reaction. We knew that the response couldn't be the same as no TV. Why? Because you're not dressed. When you say no to your kids, can I have TV? No. You just say no, but you're not saying no forever, right? You're not saying, no, the TV has been banned until you're 86. I mean, you're not saying that, but that's what you're saying to them. That doesn't work for our son. It probably doesn't work for your son, even if they're purely neurotypical. But from our point of view, yes, you can have TV once you get dressed. One way or another, they're going to realize at some point, if they really want that thing and they've been told they can have it, they've been given yes, just have to do this. This, and then this. It's a very simple example of how before diagnosis, we had already altered our parenting styles. A universal thread though, through the entire time of my firstborn from birth, and I mean literally still in the hospital from birth through to diagnosis, I just assumed I was a really bad dad. Some days I still think I'm a bad dad, but that's because I guess it can be really challenging. It wasn't just the fact that I thought I was a bad parent or I just wasn't good at this or this wasn't my thing, I just couldn't do it. And by the way, I didn't know I was autistic at this point when my son was born. So feeling like you're just bad at this and this just isn't for you, it led us to go, look, let's try and work out some things that can help our son because he's the one going through this. So how can we help him with his challenges and therefore that will help us? So we sought the advice of a psychologist, And these types of things where he can have a conversation. Sure, he's only young, but at least they can gauge, because they deal with other kids, where he is, where he sits in the world. And that's where the diagnosis for him started. We were initially told, it was flagged by a psychologist, that autism might be on the radar for our firstborn. And this was really interesting because it set off a chain of events that incorporated my interest in getting to know autism more, and then not an interest anymore, but a hell-bent belief that this was me. We organised an assessment, and at the same time I started researching it. And as I did that, I was ticking more than I was crossing out, but it was for me. I didn't realise, I was trying to get to know autism for my son, but then I realised, hang on a second, this is me. All these things are me. There's almost everything is ringing a bell for me. This is me. What was amazing was with my son and us then seeking a diagnosis for our son, it actually led to me seeking a diagnosis for myself. And what's extraordinary is when I look back, but for, so I think I'm going into like law school terminology now. We're doing torts law today, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for coming. And no, we're not. But for my son being born, I would not have ever known I was autistic. That's big. So the turning point in my life was my firstborn son's autistic diagnosis. So we are super grateful that we had the opportunity for our son to go through that process. He was diagnosed autistic. It's one of those moments where my wife and I, by the time it got to the announcement, we have to go in and let's tell you a story of his diagnosis, page 1. And they read you the whole report like it's a story, and then it's a big cliffhanger at the end. Is he or isn't he? You know what, let's go to the end of the book. Can we just go to the end of the book? Yeah, he's autistic, the end. And we'll take the report home and read it later on. Do we have to sit there for an hour and listen to your story of the report? Is that why it costs another $1,000? Anyway, I must have got off on the wrong side of the bed. You know what, by the way, there isn't a wrong side of the bed. There's only two sides to a bed. There's the bed head, there's the end of the bed, and then there's two sides. And both sides are accessible. So how can you get off on the wrong side? You can get off on your side of the bed. If you sleep alone, there's no wrong side of the bed. There's two sides. You can't get off on the wrong side of the bed. You get off your bed. Bottom line, my son was diagnosed autistic. There's no need to go into the process. That was it. That led to my seeking a diagnosis, or at least seeking an assessment, and I was diagnosed as autistic. Now, as an autistic dad with an autistic son, there are clear parenting challenges, and this is the same for any parents or carers of autistic kids. And prior to our son's diagnosis at 5, my wife and I really did struggle at times to come to grips with the best way to parent our son based on how he exhibited emotions and behaviors and actions and reactions. I'll give you some examples of some of our firstborn son's behaviors in day-to-day life that prior to diagnosis were really challenging, but challenging in a way where we didn't know why. Why was this happening? Some really clear examples that I remember. In fact, this hasn't gone away, and why would it? If you have a son or daughter who hasn't been diagnosed and then they're diagnosed, being diagnosed doesn't get rid of the things they do. I don't want people to think that they will wear out of it. Sure, they're really challenging as kids, but they're not going to be that bad as adults. Well, that's right, because you can't be 6 when you're an adult. A 6-year-old reaction compared to a 40-year-old reaction is going to be different regardless of whether you're neurotypical or autistic. But you're still having the same reactions. They're just coming across differently because you're a different age. Does that make sense? You'll still have those behaviors because they're triggered, they're responses, they're triggered responses because your brain as an autistic person experiences, sees, feels, hears, reacts to the world differently. It's a different brain. It's wired differently. It doesn't change. Sure, they will have challenges. Some on the autism spectrum more than others. Some profoundly challenged. Some requiring constant care. Some requiring pretty serious to moderate care. And some requiring support. I don't think anyone has any less value on the spectrum. Their life is their life. They are who they are. They are them. One of the things that I really struggled with, one of the behaviors that I still struggle with from our firstborn son who's now diagnosed autistic is role-playing games. Honestly, and I'm autistic too, as an autistic dad with an autistic son, this is one of my big challenges. He can play independently, but for the most part, he's like, okay, we're going to play this game now. You will be this, I will be that. He's directing, even on the trampoline. I mean, you can't just go to the trampoline and watch him jump. You've got to get on the trampoline with him and act out some sort of game, play some sort of game. So you basically are an extra, potentially an actor, in a movie directed by my son. This is not Home Alone 7. I'm not going to get beaten up by a 6-year-old for 30 minutes and you call it a game. He's not always a fan of playing with other kids. He does play with kids, certainly at school, but he doesn't seek the company of kids. Like, oh, there's a kid from down the street, why don't you go ride your bike with him? No, he doesn't want to do that. But with adults, he'll just walk up to them on the street, start talking to them. So these are behaviors and experiences that can be extremely challenging as an autistic dad. The last thing I'd ever want to do is walk up to someone and, cold and start talking to them. Cold as in unannounced or whatever. It's the worst thing I could ever want to do. My son loves it, and he always does it with me. It's like, oh my God. He'll ask them questions. We'll walk past something and they're doing something. He'll just go, what are you doing? That's your opening line, dude. What are you doing? What do you think he's doing? And because I don't want to talk to them, I'm like, well, can't you see what he's doing? Oh, he's doing this. So let's talk about the benefits of a diagnosis. Well, for me, the benefit of being diagnosed autistic is it gave me a sense of self. I was not broken, I was autistic. And I think the benefits of being diagnosed as autistic as a child are fantastic too, not only for the child, but also for the parents. They can now provide a much better, more focused upbringing to provide that autistic child with the best possible outcome in their life. Being diagnosed autistic, in my opinion, was profoundly important, profoundly beneficial for my son and I. It gives you a new feeling that you are no longer the person you thought you were, which isn't good, by the way. If you live your entire life and you are autistic, you were born autistic, but you don't know you're autistic, what you're doing is you're being forced to live your life in a normal world as a normal person when you actually aren't. You actually can't. So of course that means that you're a failure and you're broken. Prior to a diagnosis, all you feel is bad about yourself. Well, I'm just a bad person, or I'm just not good, or I'm just not cut out for this, or I'm not effective or useful. I don't have anything to contribute. So it's I can't tell you how profoundly beneficial the diagnosis was for me, and certainly for my son. And as an autistic dad, given that we were diagnosed at pretty much the same time, I think the benefits of being autistic and a dad of an autistic son was that I now was passionate about really devoting my life to advocating for my son, his future, and the autistic community. So that's a benefit of being an autistic dad with an autistic son. I can only speak on behalf of me. As an autistic dad, my wife tells me, and I kind of get the impression from people's reactions too, that I'm not a normal dad. Being an autistic dad, there's something about how I act as a dad that's very different to regular, everyday, neurotypical dads. As an autistic dad, I can play with my kids on their level. Doesn't mean I don't get completely over it after a while. Who doesn't? And that's the challenge of being an autistic dad. There's a fine line there. I guess another factor of being an autistic dad is that I'm hands-on. Now, clearly, there are neurotypical dads out there who are extremely hands-on. But as a hands-on dad in the first place, it wasn't really an issue for me. Maybe it's just me, maybe it's autistic people in general. I don't care what other dads think. I don't even know other dads. I spend every day thinking I'm a bad dad, but when I say that, when I say those types of things out loud, I realize I'm far from a bad dad. I'm a hands-on dad. I'm an autistic hands-on dad. So it doesn't mean I'm perfect. It means I feel pretty bad at doing it most days, but I'm not abandoning my family so I can go and hang out on a golf course. I'm gonna be completely honest and share with you the challenges that I face as an autistic dad raising an autistic son. Now, on the one hand, as an autistic person, I can understand my son in a way that most others can't. I can advocate for my son from actual lived experience of being an autistic person. But on the other hand, because we're both autistic, we can trigger each other on a much higher level than neurotypical people would or could. Both my son can easily trigger me and I can easily trigger him. And it comes across to neurotypical people like we are willingly, maybe even maliciously trying to trigger each other. It isn't though, because see, what triggers me doesn't trigger him. And what triggers him doesn't trigger me. For example, the way I stim, for those that don't understand, it's basically short for self-stimulation. So the way our brain processes the world and reacts to the world is so different that a lot of times we are self-soothing. When I stim sometimes, because clearly if you're an autistic dad and you're parenting an autistic son, or two sons, one autistic, one neurotypical, you're going to be triggered or overwhelmed because you're autistic and it's the real world. I might start stimming in ways that I do, which saying really weird catchphrases from movies or TV shows or ads, like just over and over or in weird voices. Or one of the big things that I do is I just start talking, but in really weird voices. Now, some might call them annoying, but for me, I just think they're funny, they're weird or they're funny, and I kind of can't stop. Or I start singing songs in weird voices. So I get like a really serious song and sing it in a really stupid voice. Anyway, that behavior, that type of stimming that I do that helps me become a better dad by grounding me and bringing me back, utterly triggers and sets off my son. Now, how can you parent as an autistic dad, parent an autistic son, if your ways of bringing yourself back and soothing yourself and calming yourself down actually triggers the autistic son you're looking after, who is in fact triggering you, causing you to stim, causing him to trigger? You see what's happening? I'm trying to care for him and look after him. He'll do things that raise my level of anxiety. Of course he does, he's an autistic kid. My son especially has very little idea of danger. He thinks it's okay to jump from the top of the stairs to the bottom of the stairs. It is okay, as long as you don't mind falling through the slab or breaking both your legs. It's perfectly fine. So my anxiety goes up, and then I start to get a little bit agitated, start triggering him. That triggers me. I do my things to help my trigger. That triggers him more. Next thing you know, fire and gasoline. But for me, the big challenge, the core challenge that I definitely want to share with you is the reality that being an autistic dad with an autistic son, I feel that I must suppress my autistic self. I must suppress my autistic responses, reactions, instincts in order to be a successful dad. It doesn't make me feel good. It saddens me, but at this point in my life, I haven't come up with a better way. Because think about it. If I just allowed myself, and as a rule, autistic people, their home is their safe place, and the people they love the most are their safe people. So what that means, and I hope you take this the right way, what that means is the people you love the most are going to get treated the worst, because in the real world, you've suppressed so much of your autistic responses all day to not melt down, to not have emotional outbursts or actions or behaviors that are not acceptable to neurotypical people. To do all that, to put all that energy in being that facade of a person, when you get into your safe space, you're free again, right? But you've got all this stuff that's been suppressed that's got to come out. So of course, you're going to treat the people you love the most quite badly, probably until you settle down, because you feel safe with them. You feel like, and because what you're doing is, in a neurotypical sense, you're treating them badly. In an autistic sense, you're treating them as an autistic person who's completely burnt out, who's completely overwhelmed, who's reached the threshold. Does that make sense? It's not bad. It's a really good insight to understand that that's the realization that I've come to. Being a dad, a successful dad, keeping your children happy, healthy, safe, empowering them to learn and grow and explore. To do that as a purely autistic person, I found, can be really challenging. Why would I want to spend my day being triggered and potentially melting down and therefore scaring my own children? I would just feel like a bad dad, which I pretty much do every day. Do you see what I mean? It's not like I don't try to be myself naturally, but if I didn't control and suppress autistic reactions for the most part, how could I ever parent my kids in a way that would be respectful, appropriate? It wouldn't. And it's different because I'm not a neurotypical dad. If I have an emotional outburst or a meltdown, it's an uncontrollable experience, but I still understand the effect it can have on people. And I don't want that effect to be had, so I suppress. So although there are immense benefits in being an autistic dad with an autistic son, and I see all those benefits as the real main meat of being an autistic dad, I still think the challenges can be really tricky. And what the challenges have led me to do is, in effect, act not autistic or suppress my true autistic self if I am constantly being triggered and melting down, or having emotional outbursts, or reacting differently, or not being able to stay in a situation, having to walk away. Well, how can I parent? Do you know what I mean? I can't tell my 1-year-old, I'm sorry, buddy, that's just too loud. I'm just going to leave the room for 5 minutes. Don't choke and die. I mean, I'm not going to do that, right? I'm going to stay in the room. I'm just going to, as I say, suck it up. The idea that you think that I can suck up a disability. I mean, if there was a person in a wheelchair and they reached a building that had no ramp and only stairs, would you tell them, come on, mate, suck it up, walk the stairs? Like, you wouldn't, right? Come on, mate, suck it up, just be a neurotypical dad. Well, okay, how do I get my brain out? Can someone bring me, I don't know, like one of those tools that would be appropriately used, and the name of that tool was, I'm great with tools. Bring me a jacksaw cleaver. So that is how an autistic dad raises an autistic son. I really hope it's provided some benefit and value to your life and your experiences. If it has, share it with your family and friends. Please subscribe to my channel. Click that subscribe button. And if you wouldn't mind, click the notifications bell so you never miss another video. And don't forget to reach out and connect with me on my socials. Find the Orion Kelly page on Facebook. Check me out on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and go to my website for all my podcasts, blogs, and videos, and a whole heap more. The website is orionkelly.com.au. Thank you so much for watching this video. I do them to help increase understanding and acceptance of autistic people. Hey, get in touch with me if this video has helped you or connected with you in any way. I'd love to hear your thoughts and feedback and experiences. I really appreciate your time, and I'll see you soon.